Welcome to the Thinking Abyss podcast, a philosophical journey through consciousness, reality, and the phenomena that challenge our understanding of existence. From ancient wisdom to cutting-edge theories, we explore where philosophy meets science and curiosity leads to the edge of the unknown.
So today we are going to the absolute edge of, well, everything.
We really are. We're stepping away from the day-to-day, the politics, the tech crazes.
Right, and we're tackling the one puzzle that sits under all of it, the big one.
The ultimate one.
Why is there anything at all?
It really is the single most fundamental question a conscious being can possibly ask. We're moving completely beyond the how of existence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how stars form, how life evolves.
Oh, mechanics.
All the mechanics. And we're plunging headfirst into the metaphysical mystery of being itself.
And it's the sheer scale of it that's so disruptive. I mean, it just breaks your brain a little bit. We're so used to explaining things by their causes, right? Mm-hmm. A house exists because a builder built it. The builder exists because of their parents. You trace it all back, evolution, chemistry, physics.
But then you hit a wall.
You hit bedrock. Mm-hmm. And you're left staring into what the philosophers, I think the sources called it, an abyss of inexplicability.
That's a perfect description. And that feeling, that the vertigo, the sense that existence is just this cosmic accident that demands some kind of justification.
Well, vertigo is the perfect word for it.
That's exactly what drives the whole inquiry. Every explanation we come up with, whether it's from physics or theology or pure logic, it's immediately undermined by that one stubborn fact. Something is here.
We just take it for granted walking around in it.
We navigate reality constantly, but the very foundation of that reality, the fact that it exists at all, it's completely unsecured.
And our sources, they rightly point out we are definitely not the first to get stuck on this. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger, he called this the fundamental question of metaphysics.
He had a pretty harsh view, didn't he?
He really did. He suggested that most people just sleepwalk through life, completely unaware of the sheer strangeness of it all.
It's the kind of question that once it really grabs you, it makes everything else feel, well, a bit trivial for a moment. It makes you question the very stage the whole play is set on.
Exactly. So our mission today is to analyze the source material you've provided that looks into this. We're going to explore some classical answers, some scientific ones, and even some existential responses to this ultimate mystery.
We're basically looking for the surprising insights that come out when humanity tries to answer. Why not just nothing?
Okay, so let's unpack this right away. Before we can even touch why something, we have to figure out what we even mean by nothing.
It's the most critical first step.
And the sources show that this is where the human mind, which is built to perceive and define something, just hits a wall, a huge conceptual wall.
A huge one. The problem is that our brains are built to perceive properties, color, dimension, energy, space. So when we try to picture nothingness, we almost always fail because we secretly smuggle something into the picture.
We can't help it.
We're trying to erase all the properties, but we end up leaving a few defining characteristics behind.
Right. So if you ask yourself to imagine nothing, the first image that probably pops into your head is, what? Empty space?
The void between galaxies, that kind of thing.
But that is absolutely not nothing. And the material we have is really adamant on this point. Space itself is a something.
A very complex something. It has dimensions, 3 of space, 1 of time. It has geometric properties.
It can curve, right?
Yeah.
Like with gravity, it expands.
And crucially, even in its most empty state, it's vibrating with quantum fields. It's a bubbling cauldron of potential. It's not nothing.
Okay, so we throw out empty space. What's the next attempt?
Absolute darkness. Just pure blackness.
But even that's a concept that depends on existence. Blackness assumes the absence of light, which means you're assuming light. And the entire system of electromagnetic radiation and the physical laws that govern it, all of that exists.
You're defining it by what it isn't, which implies the thing it isn't is real.
Precisely. True nothingness couldn't have a color or a dimension or a temperature. It can't have any characteristic because those are all properties that need a context to exist in.
And the last little trick our mind plays, according to the sources, is thinking of nothing as the time before existence, as if time is a big empty box that was just waiting to be filled.
But true nothingness, this deep analysis shows, it includes no time at all. There's no before, no after, no during. It is the total, absolute absence of everything.
Including concepts, which is where it gets really tricky.
This leads us right to the philosopher Robert Nozick. His insight was that our inability to even conceive of this might not be a failure of imagination.
But a clue, a really important metaphysical clue.
What was a clue?
He suggested that maybe the concept of nothingness is just linguistically coherent. The words sound fine together, but it's metaphysically incoherent. It might refer to a state that is logically impossible.
I think I see the distinction. It's like asking me to draw a four-sided triangle.
Exactly. The words make grammatical sense, but the object itself cannot exist. It's a contradiction in terms.
So why would absolute nothingness be a contradiction?
Well, the sources highlight this really interesting point.
Yeah.
The very act of thinking about the concept brings something into existence that contradicts the state you're describing.
The thought itself.
The thought exists. If I write about nothing, the writing exists. Nothingness, by its very definition, can't be anything, not even an object of thought.
So it's like an intellectual trap, a linguistic illusion that makes us think there's a problem where there might not be one.
That's how some thinkers see it.
So if we pull all this together, the big question gets unstable right from the start. If we can't even properly define nothing, if the idea keeps collapsing into something, whether it's a quantum field or just the thought of a void.
Then how can you coherently ask why we didn't get that instead?
Yeah, right. If nothing isn't a real available alternative, then the question why something rather than nothing kind of loses its power.
It loses its comparative force. It might not be about finding the right answer, but about realizing we're asking the wrong question, or at least a misunderstood one. We're applying ideas like choice and possibility at a level where they might not even apply.
Which forces the classical thinkers to take a completely different route. They sort of ignore the void and focus on this deep need for an explanation.
Exactly. If trying to define the void just leads you into logical quicksand, the classical philosophical approach plants its feet on much firmer ground.
Which is what?
A deep, persistent human intuition. The feeling that everything we see, everything that happens, has to have a reason. A justification for why it's this way and not some other way.
And that intuition, which is so basic to science, to everything really, it has a formal name in philosophy.
The principle of sufficient reason, or PSR.
PSR. It just posits that for every single fact, there has to be a complete, understandable explanation for why it is so and not otherwise.
When a scientist sees an effect, they look for a cause. The PSR is just applying that same logic to everything, to the universe itself.
And the sources show that Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, back in the 17th century, he made this principle the absolute core of his whole system.
He did. He looked at the universe, the stars, the planets, the specific laws of physics, and he said, this is all contingent.
Okay, let's break down what contingent means here for you listening.
Contingency is the crucial idea. It means the thing in question could have been different, or it might not have existed at all.
So our universe is contingent because we can easily imagine a different one. A universe where gravity is a little bit stronger, or where
matter never clumped together, or, and this is the most critical part, a universe where nothing at all ever existed.
So because our universe is contingent, it can't be its own explanation. It needs an explanation from outside itself.
That's the logic.
But doesn't that just immediately walk us into that classic philosophical trap, the infinite regress?
The turtles all the way down problem.
Right. If every explanation needs its own explanation and that one needs another, you're just chasing pauses back forever. And that's so unsatisfying. Nothing ever gets properly explained.
And that's the exact problem Leibniz saw. He knew that the chain of explanations has to end somewhere. It needs an anchor, or the whole thing is just floating.
So what was his anchor? How did he stop the regress?
His solution was the concept of the necessary being.
A necessary being.
He proposed that to stop the infinite chain, there has to be something that is not contingent, something that exists by its own very nature, something that couldn't possibly not exist.
So it's self-explanatory. Its existence is necessary, so it doesn't need an external cause.
Its essence is its existence.
And following the tradition of Western thought, Leibniz said this necessary being is God.
He identified it as God. The idea is that this necessary being serves as the ultimate grounds, the final sufficient reason for everything else that's contingent, like the universe.
And the sources really stress that he didn't see God as just another brute fact. He saw God as a necessary fact, who then freely chose to create this specific universe, the best of all possible universes.
It creates a perfectly rational structure for everything. The reason for X is Y, the reason for Y is Z, and the reason for the whole chain is the necessary being, which, by definition, needs no further reason. It seems logically airtight.
But I can already see the critique forming, and the sources jump right on it. Isn't just positing a necessary being a way of defining the problem away.
How so?
Well, you start with the principle of sufficient reason, that everything needs an explanation. But then you solve it by inventing a single thing that doesn't need one. It feels like you're breaking your own rule at the finish line.
That is the core challenge. Critics say he just gave a fancy name to the ultimate brute fact. Instead of the universe being the brute fact, now God is. And what does it even mean for existence itself to be necessary?
Right. I can understand why 2 + 2 = 4 is necessary. It's a concept. But applying that kind of necessity to a physical, active existence, that's a huge leap.
It's very abstract and hard to prove without just going in circles.
And there's another problem, right? Even if we grant that this necessary being exists, the problem just shifts. It shifts from existence to action.
Hold on.
Why would a perfect, self-sufficient being, something that has all reason within itself, choose to create anything else? Why move from perfect self-containment to our messy, contingent, often pretty imperfect world?
So the explanation for why there's a universe then rests on the necessary being's choice?
Which feels a lot like another kind of brute fact. It's an arbitrary will.
Exactly. The moment you bring in choice, you bring contingency back into the process. And if that choice is the final reason, then the reason for existence isn't necessity after all. It's will.
That philosophical knot is probably what pushes us toward trying to prove this ultimate ground through, observation of the world itself. And that structural problem leads us right into the cosmological framework. These are arguments that try to prove there has to be some kind of grounding entity, like God, just from the simple fact that, that things exist.
Cosmological arguments have been central to Western philosophy for, millennia. They try to build a bridge from the contingent things we see every day to a first non-contingent reality.
And Thomas Aquinas is the big name here, right? His 5...
That's probably the most famous. His 5 ways really laid the foundation for centuries of this debate.
We should definitely detail a few of them, because even if you don't buy the conclusion, the logic itself is really fascinating. The first 3 are all about this idea of regress. Let's start with the argument for motion.
Okay, so Aquinas starts with a simple observation.
Yeah.
We see things moving.
A ball rolling, wind blowing, planets orbiting.
And common sense tells us that anything that's moving is moved by something else. The ball moves because it was kicked. The air molecules move because of heat energy. But that chain of movers can't go back forever.
Why not?
Because if it did, there would be no initial source of the motion. And if there was no first push, nothing would be moving now. So he concludes there must be an unmoved mover.
The ultimate source of all motion that wasn't itself moved.
Exactly. And second, he makes almost the same argument, but for causation.
The idea of efficient cause.
Right. Everything we see is an effect that was caused by something before it. If you take away the cause, you don't get the effect. And just like motion, this chain of causes can't regress infinitely into the past.
Because if there were no first cause, there would be no second causes, and no third, and nothing would be happening now.
So there must be an uncaused cause, the ultimate starting point.
And the third one, the argument from contingency, really echoes what Leibniz was talking about.
It does. It starts from the observation that we see contingent things all around us, things that are born and then die, that come into being and pass away. They could have not existed.
Like us, or a tree, or a star.
Now, if everything in existence were contingent, then given an infinite amount of time, eventually there would be a moment when nothing existed. Because every contingent thing would have, at some point, ceased to be.
And if there was a time with absolutely nothing,
then nothing could ever come from it. Nothing comes from nothing. Therefore, there must be something that is necessary, something that cannot possibly not exist to ground all the contingent things.
So all 3 of those paths, motion, cause, contingency, they all end up in the same place, a self-sufficient, non-contingent being.
That's the argument. And the modern version of this, the Kalam cosmological argument, makes a similar point, but really focuses on time.
Tell us about that one.
The Kalam argument says the universe must have had a beginning. The reason is that an infinite past is impossible to sort of get through.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. If the past was truly infinite, you could never arrive at this present moment because an infinite number of moments would have had to pass first.
You can't count to infinity.
You can't complete an infinite series. So, since we are clearly in the present moment, the past must be finite, which means the universe began to exist.
And if it began to exist, it needed a cause.
And that cause must be non-physical, outside of space and time.
I see the power in that logic. But this whole framework, from Aquinas to Calm, it all rests on one huge assumption, doesn't it?
Which is?
That the rules that apply to things inside the universe must apply to the universe as a whole. And this is where the great philosophical skeptics like David Hume come in.
Hume's challenge is, it's probably the sharpest knife in this whole debate. He just asked why. Why should the principle of sufficient reason, which works great for things like kickballs and growing trees, apply to the entire cosmos?
We've never seen a universe being created.
Exactly. So we have no basis for claiming we know the metaphysical rules it has to follow.
Hume's point was that maybe the universe is just this unique, singular thing that's fundamentally different from everything in it. So asking for its cause might be a massive category error.
Like asking what the color blue tastes like.
Yeah, it's an intellectual habit that we're applying where it just doesn't belong.
And that philosophical move, that denial that the whole thing needs an external explanation, it paved the way for the most radical alternative we have in the sources.
The brute fact position, famously put by Bertrand Russell.
Right. When he was challenged on why there's a universe and if God was the necessary first cause, Russell just said the universe is just there and that's all.
It's the ultimate intellectual stop sign. It means we just abandon the search for an explanation of existence itself.
It's an appealing position for many because it's intellectually, clean. It's parsimonious. It doesn't invent a necessary being or anything else. It just says the chain of why has to stop somewhere.
And Russell's point was, why not stop with reality itself? That's the most honest place to stop.
He was essentially saying the universe is causally closed, there's nothing outside of it, and it's intrinsically meaningless.
But I have to push back here, as the sources do. I mean, while it's honest, it feels like a huge concession. It just violates that core human drive to find reasons for things.
It does.
If we say the universe is a brute fact, why do we keep looking for explanations for the laws of physics or the Big Bang's initial conditions? Why stop the why chain right there, just because the object got too big?
That's the challenge it presents. If you accept Russell's view, you're not just giving up on metaphysics, you're potentially giving up on the idea that everything can be understood by human reason.
It's admitting there's a fundamental limit to how much we can know. The cosmos just answers why not and hangs up the phone.
It feels like an intellectual surrender, even if it's a rigorous one. But there's a creative counter-argument in the sources from a philosopher named Bede Rundle.
Right, he tried to flip the whole thing on its head.
He argued that maybe we've got it backward. Maybe existence is the default state, the simplest, least restrictive state. Think of all the rules required for absolute nothingness. No space, no time, no laws, no possibility. That's an incredibly specific and restrictive state.
Whereas being in general is much less restrictive.
So maybe, Rendell suggested, it's non-existence that's the truly weird state. Maybe it's the one that would require a massive special explanation. Maybe non-existence is just impossible.
I love that reversal. It's fascinating. But it still leaves you wanting to know why it's impossible. What's the logical mechanism that forces reality to exist? The brute fact idea, whichever way you flip it, doesn't really answer the why. It just changes the question or tells you to stop asking.
And that failure of traditional philosophy really prompted a major shift in the 20th century, away from philosophy and toward science.
Exactly. Seeing these philosophical debates just go in circles, either infinite regress or just surrendering to the brute fact, modern thinkers, especially physicists, decided to try a different route.
They tried to bypass philosophy altogether.
Right. They approached the question not by looking for a necessary being, but by trying to find a physical mechanism, a way for the universe to create itself from some kind of minimal, purely natural conditions.
And this search for self-creation leads directly to what you might call the quantum escape hatch.
It really does. Modern physics, through quantum mechanics, it shows us this weird phenomenon of virtual particles constantly popping into and out of existence from the quantum vacuum.
Just spontaneous fluctuations.
And here's the key part. The total net energy of the universe is potentially zero. You've got all the positive energy of matter and radiation, but it might be perfectly balanced by the negative energy of gravity.
So the universe could be the ultimate free lunch. That's the idea. Physicist Lawrence Krauss was a huge champion of this in his work. He argued that a universe from nothing is something we can now understand through natural processes. His thesis was revolutionary.
He was saying we don't need a divine creator or a first cause anymore.
Because quantum physics gives us the mechanism for a whole universe to emerge from a vacuum state just by following the established laws of physics.
But this idea got some very heavy pushback, both from philosophers and from other physicists. And the main criticism, especially from someone like David Albert, is very specific and very powerful.
And what's that?
That the quantum vacuum is emphatically not nothing.
This is a critical distinction that, you listening really need to grasp. Krauss solved the physics problem, which is, how does matter appear?
But he did it by using pre-existing physical conditions.
Right.
Quantum fields, non-zero vacuum energy, and the incredibly complex laws of quantum mechanics.
The quantum vacuum is a thing. It's a complex physical entity with properties. It's a dynamic state governed by very specific mathematical rules. If you take away the vacuum and its laws, you're back to true nothingness, and the whole quantum argument just evaporates.
So the ultimate philosophical question just snaps right back into place. Krauss might have explained why there's matter instead of an empty vacuum, but now the question is, why do those laws and those quantum fields exist in the first place?
Why this specific mathematical structure and not some other one, or none at all?
The escape hatch just pushes the mystery back one level into the world of abstract laws.
And recognizing that, others have tried to promote the laws themselves to the role of creator. Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mlodinow, in their book The Grand Design, they argued that the law of gravity allows the universe to spontaneously create itself from nothing.
So the law itself is the reason for existence. The laws are the ultimate explanation.
It's an appealing idea because it gets rid of any need for an external agent.
But the sources have this brilliant critique of that idea using a really simple analogy.
The chess analogy.
The chess analogy. Saying that laws create the universe is like saying the rules of chess create chess games.
And that's so effective because it shows the confusion between a description and a cause. The rules of chess describe how the pieces can move once you already have a board and pieces and someone playing.
They describe the behavior of the system. They don't explain why there's a board or pieces or why anyone is even playing the game.
Exactly. Laws govern existence. They don't necessarily explain the fact of existence. You still need something to, as Hawking himself said, breathe fire into the equations to make them describe an actual reality.
So if self-creation from a vacuum fails, and the laws themselves aren't enough, what's the next big scientific attempt to sidestep the problem?
The multiverse. This is a very popular idea right now, coming out of theories like string theory and eternal inflation.
The multiverse is an attempt to deal with the fine-tuning problem, right? The fact that our universe seems so perfectly set up for life.
Exactly. If our universe is just one bubble in an infinite collection of universes, each with different laws and physical constants, then our universe isn't special anymore.
Asking why our universe exists becomes like asking why one specific coin flip landed on heads when there are trillions of coins being flipped all the time. It's just chance happening inside a much bigger structure.
It definitely makes our universe seem less miraculous from a statistical point of view. But does it solve the core problem of existence?
This is what the sources call the multiplication problem. Instead of asking, why is there one universe? We now have to ask,
why is there an infinite, eternally inflating, multidimensional collection of universes?
The problem hasn't been solved at all. It's just been shifted up to a much grander, more complex level.
We're now forced to ask, what explains the whole ensemble? What are the meta laws, the laws that govern the structure of the multiverse itself, and decide which kinds of universes are even possible?
You're just pushing the explanatory burden back to a new meta law or meta mechanism that has no external cause. It's the same problem, just with a bigger universe.
And if the multiverse is a consequence of string theory or something similar, then the multiverse itself is contingent on those theories being a correct description of reality.
So, once again, the ultimate question comes roaring back. Why that particular set of meta laws? Why that mathematical structure instead of a total blank slate?
The scientific escape routes are incredibly powerful for explaining the mechanics of how our universe works, but they just can't seem to escape the metaphysical demand for an explanation of the initial conditions, the source code itself. And since we've hit these walls in both classical philosophy and in modern physics, we have to turn to some really radical conceptual ideas. Ideas that try to redefine reality itself so that existence becomes logically necessary.
Which brings us to the truly mind-bending hypothesis from Max Tegmark, the mathematical universe.
This theory suggests that reality isn't just described by mathematics, it is mathematics.
Physical existence and mathematical existence are the exact same thing.
Exactly. Tegmark's idea is that reality is made up of all the mathematical structures that are complex enough to contain self-aware substructures, like us.
So if that's true, then something exists because mathematical structures just necessarily exist.
You can't even conceive of true nothingness, because even the concept of nothing, the null set, the number zero, is a mathematical concept.
Yeah.
And it exists abstractly and eternally. Since math necessarily exists and reality is math, then reality necessarily exists.
That is incredibly elegant. It completely bypasses the whole debate about a necessary being. It replaces a necessary agent with necessary structure. The question why something gets the answer because structure is necessary.
But, and it's a huge but, this brings up the most profound challenge to this view, one that even Hawking pointed out. It's the problem of the fire in the equations.
The fire in the equations. Explain that.
Why does abstract conceptual mathematical existence translate into concrete physical actuality?
I see the gap. The number 3 exists as a concept. The equations of general relativity exist as mathematical truths. But why does that abstract truth translate into an actual burning star with real mass and energy and a history?
It's the chasm between possibility and actuality. So many things are logically possible. A universe with 5 dimensions, a universe ruled by blue goo. But only our specific reality seems to be actualized.
So what's the process? What's the mechanism that, to use Hawking's phrase again, breathes fire into the equations and makes a universe for them to describe?
That bridge between the abstract and the concrete is just completely unexplained, even if you buy the whole mathematical universe idea.
This leads us to what might be the most profound conceptual roadblock of all, one that kind of undercuts the entire question we've been asking. The sources call it the possibility problem.
This is where things get really deep. When we ask why something rather than nothing, we're implicitly comparing 2 states that we assume are logically possible: existence and non-existence.
We assume they were both options on the table within some kind of overarching logical framework.
And here's the conceptual roadblock that might make the question just collapse in on itself.
Okay.
For absolute non-existence, true nothingness, to be a real viable possibility, wouldn't there have to be some kind of framework, a realm of possibilities, or a meta-context where both being and non-being could happen?
If there were truly nothing, no space, no time, no laws, no consciousness,
And no context for possibility itself.
then there would be no realm where the possibility of existence could even be a thing, or where the possibility of non-existence could be a thing.
If possibility itself is wiped out by absolute nothingness, then the comparison we're trying to make is impossible.
That is a devastating critique of the whole premise. It implies this strange logical trap. The state of absolute non-existence might logically prevent the very comparison that lets us ask the question in the first place.
If the concept of true nothingness is so restrictive that it eliminates even the capacity for alternatives,
then existence is the only possibility that could ever have been, not because it was caused to be necessary, but because the alternative is conceptually incoherent at the most fundamental level.
but if we can't crack this with our concepts, maybe the answer isn't in reality itself, but in the limits of our own minds. This is the Mysterian barrier, the idea that we are cognitively closed off from the answer.
The Mysterian position, from thinkers like Colin McGinn, he suggests that maybe there's a perfect, profound explanation for why reality exists.
But our brains, which evolved to find food and avoid predators on the African savanna, just don't have the conceptual toolkit to grasp it.
It's like a dog trying to understand quantum mechanics.
The dog analogy is a good start, but you can think about our own limitations. We can write the equations for 10 spatial dimensions, but we can't visualize them. Our visual cortex is capped at 3. McGinn is suggesting that our conceptual cortex might be capped in a similar way.
We just can't grasp the ultimate relationship between necessity and existence, or between abstract math and physical reality.
Our consciousness is a tool that's perfectly designed for certain jobs, but completely wrong for this foundational task of metaphysics. It's like using a screwdriver to analyze sound waves. The tool just doesn't fit the job.
That's a sobering and, honestly, a pretty frustrating thought. It means we might be permanently locked out of the deepest truth about our own reality.
We could argue about first causes and quantum fields forever, and every answer would be flawed because we're missing some crucial, inconceivable conceptual piece of the puzzle.
But declaring cognitive closure, that feels a bit like giving up, doesn't it? That's the dilemma of defeat the sources mention. Is it premature to say the answer is permanently inaccessible?
Maybe we just haven't found the right math yet, or the right philosophical analogy.
Declaring a Mysterian barrier could just be an excuse for not being clever enough yet. It's this permanent tension between our desire to know and the limits of our minds.
Since pure metaphysics and physics and conceptual analysis all seem to lead to these deep, maybe even permanent roadblocks, a lot of thinkers in the 20th century just shifted the focus completely.
The existentialists.
The existentialists. They chose to deal with the profound implications of living in a universe without an explanation, rather than trying to find the explanation itself.
This is Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy: existence precedes essence.
Right. If you believe in a creator, the creator first designs the essence of a thing, like a paper knife, and then makes the thing exist.
But since we can't find an ultimate cosmic creator or explanation, humans are just thrown into being, as the sources say.
We're thrown into being without any inherent explanation, justification, or predefined purpose. We just are.
For the existentialists, realizing this groundlessness it's terrifying, but it's also profoundly liberating.
In what way?
If the universe doesn't impose any ultimate meaning on you, if there's no necessary being who wrote a cosmic plan for what you should be or do, then all meaning has to be created by you.
And that lack of universal meaning implies absolute freedom.
Exactly. The terrifying weight of just being here without any justification is balanced by the freedom to define ourselves. The question, why is there something, becomes, for the existentialist, a distraction.
A distraction from the more urgent question.
Which is, given that we are here without any external purpose, what do we do now?
This groundlessness, which can feel like a crisis, is actually where we find our highest value. We are completely free to create our own meaning, define our own essence, because the universe didn't do it for us. The universe is indifferent.
So we are responsible for injecting value into it.
This struggle is captured so beautifully by Albert Camus in The Myth of Sisyphus.
Rolling the boulder up the mountain, only for it to roll back down forever.
Seen from the outside, life can look like that. A meaningless, pointless, repetitive struggle.
But Camus accepts that meaninglessness. He calls it the absurd. He admits the world is silent when we ask for a purpose. But the power is in his conclusion.
One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
It's not an answer to the metaphysical question, but it's a profound answer to the human condition. Sisyphus finds his happiness not in succeeding, but in recognizing the absurdity and affirming life anyway.
He finds value in the conscious choice to keep rolling the boulder, in the struggle itself, in his rebellion against the meaninglessness.
So the acceptance of groundlessness becomes the foundation for creating your own meaning in your own life, in your work, your relationships, your art.
And that's the direct link to you, the listener. If you accept that philosophy and science can't give you a universal why, then you are immediately faced with the task of creation. Your identity, your values. They're all choices you make in a cosmic void of justification. And that, maybe, is the ultimate consequence of asking the question.
So after this whole journey, through logic, physics, existentialism, where do the sources finally land? They seem to conclude that while we don't have a satisfying, unified answer, the question itself is invaluable.
It's not the solution, but the seeking of the solution that transforms us. The pursuit of this question is what gave birth to metaphysics, theology, and even modern science. It forces us to define our terms, check our assumptions, and see the limits of our own minds.
The poet Rainer Maria Rilke probably gives the best advice here. He said, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves."
The value is in the wonder, the awe, the realization of the sheer strangeness of it all, which is all around us, all the time. But we so rarely confront it.
And it brings us back to that idea of the statistical miracle of being. I mean, think about what existence has done. Through chance and contingency, simple matter organized itself into us. A pattern complex enough to turn back and ask, why is there matter?
That's not an answer to the puzzle, but it is a reason for profound wonder and appreciation for this bizarre, fragile, and intensely beautiful reality we find ourselves in.
So we have completed a pretty comprehensive exploration of what might be the biggest question of all.
We really have.
We've looked at the classical structure of Leibniz's necessary being, which tried to stop that infinite regress. We confronted the intellectual honesty of Russell's brute fact, which just says we should stop asking.
Then we saw modern science try to use quantum vacuums and multiverses, only to see the question shift to abstract laws and meta laws.
And finally, we looked at the existential response, finding this profound freedom and meaning in the very lag of an ultimate justification.
The source material really confirms that every one of these intellectual paths leads to a point of intense discomfort. It forces you to either make a leap of faith, reject the question entirely, or just accept the mystery.
The fact remains that we live in a reality that, as far as we can tell, just didn't have to be. And that contingency is maybe the most defining and humbling part of being human.
It really is.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over, building on that possibility problem we discussed. If non-existence requires absolute nothing, no laws, no context, and crucially, no space of possibilities, does the mere logical consistency of the question, why is something rather than nothing, prove, paradoxically, that the state of nothing was never truly an available option in the first place?
That if you can ask the question, the game is already underway.
Exactly. The possibility of asking proves the existence that allows for the question.
A truly profound thought to carry forward. We appreciate you bringing this incredibly rich set of material for us to get into today.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the absolute biggest question. We appreciate your curiosity.